This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
Week 5 is going to be a fun one. Some of this year's most fascinating teams are in pretty fun games to bet for this week. We're going to break down those games, our betting leans on those, and get you set to fill out some hopefully profitable betting cards in week number 5. This is Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sanas. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, joined here as I am each Thursday by Ryan Williams. Check him out on Twitter at Ryan Alexander _W. Ryan, you are in the middle of a move, and yet you still found time top on the podcast for today to bless the people with keeping your hot streak going. How you doing today?
Yeah, we just got to keep the streak alive as long as we can, Jim. You know, it's an early morning here in Central Time that you ping me for, but you know, if I'm able to make it work, I'll make it work. So we, you know, not too many weeks that we get to talk about football as we've discussed multiple times together, Jim. So, you know, can't pass up on opportunities to talk about some of these best bets.
We got to take advantage, man. You know, that's the way things work right now. So we'll be doing that. I appreciate you carving out time for us still, despite a very busy schedule for you. We'll break down our 3 biggest games of the week. We'll talk some futures markets as well, do a little mid-season check-in with those, and also break down Ryan's favorite bets across week number 5. But first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. Our week 6 college football podcast with me and Ed Fang is now posted. Find that on the Covering the Spread podcast feed. It is also up on the FanDuel YouTube page. Subscribe to both of those to get our shows as they go live each and every weekday. Also, Twisted Tea and FanDuel have joined forces to bring you a one-of-a-kind contest series that gives you a chance to compete for your share of thousands of dollars in site credit. Introducing Twisted Tea's College Football Picks, a sports betting-focused contest series that's entirely free to play. The contest is simple. Each college football game will be assigned money line, spread, and total markets with assigned points to each market. All you have to do is make 6 selections based on those 3 markets and earn points for each correct selection you made. If at the end of the day, your score ranks among the best in the contest, you'll be eligible for your share of site credit. Head to FanDuel.com/TwistedTeaPicks and make your picks. And reminder, please drink responsibly. FanDuel.com/TwistedTeaPicks. Now, we'll break down the big games for this week in just one second. But first, do you want to do a quick check-in of the futures market? Because we've had 4 games to sample on each team so far, and that does still give us some wiggle room for some market inefficiency, buying low on teams that may have struggled or potentially buying high on teams that we think are legit and have gotten off to good starts. So, Ryan, when you check out the futures market right now, anything standing out to you as far as being good bets at this moment?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things I like to look, I mean, I look all across the board, but I think the biggest thing when you're talking about the macro view of the season is where are the win totals at right now and what they did and open at. And so when you're looking at a team like the Carolina Panthers jump off the page to me right now, their total win totals at 5.5. And okay, so you're looking at the schedule and like, yeah, they were able to eke out 1 win, but looking forward in this NFC South, it's going to be a battle. You got Atlanta, one of the best covering teams, Tampa Bay, however you want to call them. They're catching, you know, a little bit of steam here. And outside of the division too, it just looks ugly. And I'm looking and I'm like, I don't know how they can get, you know, more than 4 more wins out of the rest of the schedule. And it's plus money on the under. So, you know, you kind of look at these things and kind of talk yourselves into narratives like, hey, where do you expect things to go going forward for this team? You take a team like the Philadelphia Eagles. Right now, their win totals at 12.5, and they have the easiest schedule. We talked about this so many times in the offseason, how easy the Philadelphia Eagles schedule was going to be at a certain point. And right now, they're favored in every game that they have later on in the season. I know it sounds crazy to have the Eagles at 12.5 in a 17-game season, but when you're looking at it, tell me where the 4 losses are. Over 4 losses that they're going to experience. It's just kind of crazy unless they have some letdown spots down the stretch or somebody gets injured. You can take a chance on that. Another team that's interesting is the Cleveland Browns. They got a quarterback situation that's going to come to fruition here later on in the season. If they can make some headway with Jacoby Brissett and kind of keep things going, you're looking at the division for them. You're looking at the team total for them, which is 8.5, I believe. So there's a lot of things at this point in time, Jim, after after 4 weeks when we're a quarter of the way through the season, or at least it used to be when it was 16 games. I'm not sure what that equates to now, but pretty much a quarter of the way through the season, when you're talking yourselves into narratives, or at least trying to paint the picture from a macro view and saying, man, if some things kind of go the way that I need them to go, like who can be that Cincinnati Bengals from 2021? Like who can catch steam later on in the season? And the books might not have baked it in because so much is happening on the present time and what's going on right now.
So you mentioned finding the Bengals of last year. I think the Bengals of last year might be the Bengals of this year too, honestly, because they've struggled so far and the offensive line has not looked good, but continuity on the offensive line is a pretty important thing. And they didn't have that coming into the year. The further they get into the season, that will improve. And I feel like we're kind of underselling the upside of this offense, and this defense has played well once again. I think that the moves they did to make sure they were not content with what their defense did last year were intriguing. So I look at the AFC North right now, and they're 2-1 to win the division. Baltimore is minus 105. And I mean, part of this ties into thoughts on that game we'll talk about this week. I think the Bengals are pretty lively in that game. And that correlates to this, potentially diving in the Bengals at plus 200 to win the AFC North. I do have them a little bit ahead of Baltimore in my power rankings right now, which is still largely a prior coming into the year. Baltimore has outperformed their prior. Cincinnati has underperformed theirs. Maybe I am clinging to that a bit too much in the number with what my model says right now, but I think they're pretty interesting. So I would say in the futures market right now, the one number that does stand out to me is actually buying into the Bengals. You mentioned 2-1 to potentially win the AFC North. And it's not fun to bet against Lamar Jackson. That's because that's kind of what that is right now. It doesn't typically go well for people who do that, but I can also view it from a perspective of betting on Joe Burrow, betting on T. Higgins, betting on Jamar Chase, and betting on a defense that has looked really good to open the year. So I think if I'm looking at the futures market, that's probably where I'm leaning right now. But Ryan, like I said, like it's not fun to bet against a pretty aesthetically pleasing Baltimore team right now.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, Jim, we talked about this. I think we talked about this last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago when the Tampa Bay Bucks were facing the Green Bay Packers. That was 2 weeks ago, I believe. And you start to look at things and do they break your way or the way that you want them to go? So like, for example, let's talk about Cincinnati and Baltimore. We'll talk about that game, but just in general, like let's say the Ravens, who are favored in this game, they end up losing this game and Cincinnati looks great. Okay. Now things are changing narrative wise on the Ravens. They're going to drop in their conference price. They're going to drop in the division price. And if you do still like the Ravens, I mean, this is it's a divisional game. Like there's no shame in losing this game to a team that was in the Super Bowl last year, and the Ravens could still just find a way to get to that point later on in the season. So I do like looking at those things where, man, is it a tough game for this team, but they can still, rebound and the public will be off of them because they just came off of a loss and they're like, man, they're not legit because they just lost to the Bengals, who we can't trust. And it could end up being that these are just two of the best teams in the AFC that end up being. We'll see what happens with Kansas City and Buffalo as they play each other next week. So that'll be fun. But yeah, I love kind of just taking it week by week, especially when we're early on in the season and when people just jump off of the boat, jump off the bandwagon. If you feel a certain type of way, let those games play out and then jump on their price right after that, because it will drop.
Well, it's an inflection point, and that's what you're talking about there. It's a situation where odds will shift pretty dramatically, and that is the case on Saturday night for the Bengals and Ravens. I think the Bengals have a decent shot to win that game, so that's part of why I think now would be the time, getting ahead of that inflection point for them. Whereas, like you're saying for Baltimore, maybe you want to be behind it, see what happens in that game, potentially buy them in on Baltimore at that point. So let's talk about another AFC North team, dive into our games of the week. We got the Chargers at the Browns. Right now, the Chargers 2.5-point favorites. Total is 47.5. And the Browns have had some really good moments at times this year, but they also lost to the Falcons and they collapsed against the Jets. That's not ideal. So what's your read on this Browns team right now entering a pretty tough game against the Chargers?
Yeah, so it's tough for me, especially with the line moving, Jim, because this
Yeah.
was at 3, and I know that there are a lot of sharps, a lot of pros hammering this number on the Browns because people feel like the Chargers are fraudulent and they have a lot of injuries going there. With Slater's out, Bosa's out. They've had a tough go, and this is a second leg of a road trip for them. On the East Coast, I believe, with the Chargers. So this is not lining up to be in the Chargers' favor, but the Cleveland Browns have had some injuries to report on their end, especially on defense. I think that'll change. I'm not sure what Clowney's status is, but I know Myles Garrett, he had the car accident and had some other injuries that were going on with that. He could be healthy for this week. But if those things don't come to fruition, I still do like the Chargers. I mean, to me, on paper, like this is the more explosive team. I think they'll figure it out on defense. I like the coach. I trust the coach a little bit more to be aggressive and things of that nature. And this is just, this is one of those spots for the Chargers. Like you kind of are up against it. I mean, the Raiders are slacking. The Broncos, we'll see who they are on Thursday Night Football, but the Chiefs are still there. So if you want a chance to get into the playoffs, like you got to be gunning for a second. These are the games that you need to win. I still have belief that Herbert can be going. We'll see what the status of Keenan Allen is, but they still have, great weapons. Love that Austin Eckler has been getting going down the stretch here or these past couple weeks. So I do like the Chargers minus 2.5. It does make me a little bit weary taking them on the road on the East Coast, but I think that this is a game that we could look back on and see that, this was kind of the right number.
Yeah, so you touched on all the key things I was going to discuss. So I'm glad we're on the same page here. My numbers are showing value on the Chargers side here, although it's showing more value on the Chargers money line. That's minus 138 right now. I think I'd be inclined to go that way versus the spread because I've got this game as I think 3 point something in favor of 3.86, and I just like the distributions better for the win here. So I'm going to go with the money line at minus 138. But with that said, I don't want to bet it right now. I'm guessing Keenan Allen will be ruled out on Friday based on his no practice on Wednesday. And I'm guessing Myles Garrett will be good to go and cleared Friday. When that occurs, I am assuming we'll see some more movement towards the Browns. So I've already got Keenan Allen out in my numbers. I've got Myles Garrett in my numbers. So I'm assuming that even if it does stay steady at minus 138, which I don't think will happen, I would be willing to bet that. But what I would do is wait till Allen is officially ruled out, wait till Garrett is officially cleared to play, and then take a look at the Chargers, see where that number is at that point. So to me, and if it stays at 138, if it stays at that number, I'm still okay with it. I'd be fine with it. But I think there's a pretty good chance we get a better number. As you said, this number did move towards the Browns overnight on Thursday or overnight Wednesday night. So that is definitely a situation worth monitoring, but I think we might get a better number, but I want the Chargers either way. So it sounds like we're on the same page with this one. It is a bummer about Slater. I do have to downgrade the Chargers in my numbers because of that, because he is the greatest of all time. But I still think the Chargers are the right side here.
Yeah, and the total is interesting too, Jim. I believe it's at 47.5 now. It dropped a point, if I'm not mistaken, from 48.5. And I do think points can be scored here. I mean, we know what Cleveland wants to do. They want to run the ball. And Nick Chubb, it's a great matchup for him against this Chargers defense. That's more, the secondary is a lot better than the front seven has been. So that could force Herbert into a passing attack with Eckler, with Palmer, with Mike Williams, even with Keenan Allen out. We've seen him have the propensity to just target, other guys outside of Allen. So it does, kind of hurt from an on-paper perspective, but I still think that, as long as you got Herbert, as long as you got Eckler on that offense, there's still a chance for them to put up points. So I think the total is interesting.
I think that I'd agree with that as well. Okay, let's talk here about the Eagles at the Cardinals. I don't want to talk about the Cardinals anymore, but we got to do it. Eagles are 5.5 point favorites, total 48.5. The Cardinals, Ryan, have gotten off to super sluggish starts each week, and they've rallied in most of the second halves to at least make things competent, at least make things somewhat interesting. Not the Chiefs game and not the Rams game, but they did play well in the second halves. So, I feel like they have good play in them, but I don't think you can afford to get off to a slow start against the Eagles. So can they actually keep pace here, or is this the Eagles another role for them?
Yeah, I don't know how we bet against the Eagles at this point. I mean, they just have been absolutely stellar, and you love the way that this defense is playing. I mean, you got to give Hurts a lot of credit because he's the one who's been dragged through the mud in media over the past 2 years about him not being a guy that could win for Philly, but he's doing that. But this defense has been absolutely stellar, and they could give Kyler problems all day with the pressure rate that they offer. And this offensive line for Arizona has not looked great. Even Kyler, passing attempt, I think he's averaging 5.7 yards per pass attempt, which is only better than Fields, I believe, which is absolutely just insane to talk about. I know Kyler, I know you're done talking about Kyler. This is a guy that you've talked about a ton.
Done talking about who? I don't recognize this name. Who are you talking about here?
But the other thing I think is just when you look at the coaching, I mean, the reason I liked Arizona last week was because how good Cliff Kingsbury has been on the road. They were going against the Carolina Panthers and they were dogs, and Cliff Kingsbury has a 19-7-2 ATS record on the road. Now he's at home and he's 9-17 at home against the spread. So when the numbers there with Kingsbury, I don't know what makes the difference with these home and road splits, but they do. And so, in that regard, I just got to look at Philly here, especially with under 7, under 6 at 5.5. It just feels right for Philly to do it. Now, I will say, I've said it before, you will get the Philly test. I mean, people still, I feel like, aren't buying into this team, but I don't know how much Arizona makes of that. But if they can go in here and win handedly, I think that, it's smooth sailing for them going forward. They got the home games against the Steelers and Cowboys on deck, and then we know what it's like in the division for them. So the Eagles are just the truth right now, Jim. We got to back them.
Yeah, so I did bet the Cardinals plus 5.5. It's one of those things, Ryan, where it's a do as I say, not as I do. And can I faithfully recommend Arizona plus 5.5 and feel good about it? No, absolutely not. But I did bet it. So I did do this. I have it at 1.73 points. And the reason that I bet this, because it's not just a beating my head against the wall, stubbornness kind of thing. I have home field as being I think I have it as being less impactful than the market does. So if I am to underestimate one side of a team based on that, I'm more likely to underestimate the home team. And despite doing that, I still have Eagles as 1.73 point favorites in this game. So that's why I did it. There was some movement towards the Cardinals money line here. I can't do that. And that comes down to the coaching thing you mentioned. Do I want to be sitting there Sunday afternoon watching Cliff Kingsbury do dumb Cliff Kingsbury stuff and needing a win? No, I'm okay with them losing by 5 and covering here. So my money line model has performed better than my spread model so far this year. So I've been more willing to bet long money lines, which we'll talk about later on. But I think here I want to take the points. So I've got Arizona plus 5.5, but I dread watching this team every week because I've bet them every week so far, I think. And it just it makes me sick, but I got to do it again.
Yeah. And this is another one of those games, Jim, where I know how much the unders have been hitting this season, but when there have been good games to target, I've been targeting them. And this is another one. The only way the Cardinals stay in this game, I can't trust the defense enough. So the only way I see them staying in this game is if Kyler is able to put up points and force the bill on the Eagles side to get things going. There's so many key weapons in this game. I mean, you're talking Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert going against each other, used to be on the same team.
Oh yeah, revenge game. Let's go.
A revenge game for Zach Ertz. Hollywood Brown has been an absolute stud. I mean, really the reason they have any chance in these games is how he's been playing. And then you love the fact that look at futures market and they will get DeAndre Hopkins back for whatever that's worth. And you see the Rams struggling in prime time. We'll see what the 49ers, I think they have a good grasp on that division. I think it's plus 120 for them to win, but the Cards, if they win this game, they control their own destiny if they start to get pieces back and healthy. So I think that looking at the total here at 48.5, it dropped by a full point from 49.5 where it opened. I think is some interesting merit because that's the only way the Cardinals stay in this game.
Do you prefer the total in this game or the Eagles minus 5.5? Which one do you feel better about between those two?
Honestly, the way that the Eagles have been playing, I'd slightly go the lean, just because of that under 6 number is just so nice. I'm honestly kind of shocked, the way that things have been playing, but that just leads me to believe, like, when I don't feel great about the number and I still see explosive sides on each offense, like I would take the total probably in a parlay bet either on the 5.5, Cardinals or Eagles side, just because this game could get out of hand and get fireworks quickly. It's going to be one of the best games on the slate.
Yeah, if the Eagles are pushed for a full game for the first time seemingly all year, that could be pretty intriguing because they haven't really had to do much in the second half yet. That could be fun.
When Miles Sanders is getting 2 touchdowns, then we know that they've got the game handedly in favor.
I'm very upset that Boston Scott was back at practice on Wednesday. Like, rest up, man. Like, rest up. Take your time. I need Miles Sanders for some stupid season-long teams that no one cares about. But, like, just rest up, Boston Scott. It's okay. You take your time, man. Let's move on here to Sunday Night Football. We got the Bengals at the Ravens. Ravens 3-point favorites here. Total is 48.5. And the Bengals, slow start this year. They did win against the Dolphins. Obviously, a very odd game, though. Did you see enough in their matchup with Miami to think they can cover and potentially win this game against Baltimore?
I did. T. Higgins being banged up, that's kind of tough. We'll see what his status is, but they're going to get Chase going. I think they have no choice but to get Mixon going. It was very tough to see him stopped on 2 goal line stands when they tried everything to get this guy like a 3 touchdown game, and it just wasn't coming to fruition, this offensive line. But this is a team that, they've had some success with in the past under Zach Taylor against the Baltimore Ravens. They throttled them in 2 regular season matchups last year, outscoring them by around 50 points or above. This Ravens team, I love them. I have so many futures on Lamar, on the Ravens in general. But it's been tough this year. They had the strong lead against Buffalo, kind of let that up. They, had the letdown game earlier on in the season against Miami. They've had a hard time holding on to leads. So, in that sense, it really makes me lean the Bengals. If they, this defense, like you talked about, has been playing stout. They haven't allowed more than 20 points per game. And I get it. It's a divisional matchup, but in that same right, anything could, kind of go either one of these teams' favor. And the 3 just seems so favorable. I know it was at 3.5 at some point. So shout out to those of you who got the hook if you were taking the Bengals side. Harbaugh is very good at covering in these situations, but I gotta lean Zach Taylor, Joe Burrow, and the boys here at getting the 3 on a primetime game. I think this is going to be it's going to be one that will be interesting, and I think that so many people are sleeping on the Bengals right now that this is a perfect spot for them to kind of wake up and change things. And so, like you're saying, with the narrative of the Bengals getting them to win the division 2-1, like, things could change right on the dime. This is a Super Bowl team from a year ago, and they have what's supposed to be on paper better pieces, I think, on the defense that's coming to fruition. But this offensive line, they'll get better as time goes along, or at least that's the hope, is that this unit just hasn't played enough together, and that's why they're struggling. So it's week 5. They can get to the halfway point, and they could turn this thing around very quickly.
Yeah, I think the key for this one is Baltimore defense. Like, if they can finally do something, then maybe you could see Baltimore being a 3-point favorite in this game, but I'm not as sold on the defense specifically. Like, the offense, they're sick. Rashad Bateman didn't practice Wednesday, but sounds like he might be okay. He did sit out, I think the entire 4th quarter last week, but weird weather there. You probably don't want to be on a bad foot on a weird surface there. So I think he should be okay to go, but the Bengals money line is plus 150 in this game. I think I'd prefer to go that way versus the +3 at -104. Now, you mentioned the 3.5. With the +3 being -104 right now, I think there's at least a shot we get to 3.5 once again. If that were to get to 3.5, you have not gotten the money line yet, then I would go with the 3.5. But with it being at 3 right now, I think I'd go with the money line at +150. Their implied odds of winning at that number are 40%, whereas I've got their odds around 48% right now. So that's a pretty big gap. Again, I think my numbers might be a bit too low on the Baltimore offense, but 8 percentage points gives me a lot of wiggle room to be off and still be on the right side versus that 40 number. So I do think that the Bengals are the right way to go with this one. The money line specifically plus 150, where I want to go there with this Bengals team. I bet +3 earlier this week. I forgot about that. I should have done the money line, but if I'm giving it from an advice perspective, I think that the money line is the preferred way to go with this one. Let's open up the board here, Ryan. Anything else standing out to you across FanDuel Sportsbook in week number 5?
Yeah, got a couple fun ones for you. So let's see, where do I want to start? Let's start with the Steelers. 14-point dogs here against Buffalo, who's coming off of that great comeback win from Josh Allen against the Ravens. And, just with everything that's going on with the Buffalo Bills on defense, the injuries that they've experienced, and just how much it took out of them, I feel like, to get that win against Baltimore there, to be able to win by 3. Then you look ahead, and as I was saying, we got rematch from the AFC Championship with the AFC divisional.
Divisional round. Yeah,
divisional round.
Bengals,
Right.
Chiefs.
That's right. Yes, right.
It shouldn't have been that round, but it was.
Yes, exactly. AFC divisional round rematch in week 6 that's coming up for the Buffalo Bills. So this is a huge spot where I could feel let down, especially when you're looking at double digits there. Tomlin has a great, record as an underdog against the spread, an underdog in general. So looking at the Steelers side, getting 14 points there. Absolutely love that. And then the Tampa Bay versus Atlanta game, the under 47.5, I believe that's still where it's at on the FanDuel Sportsbook. Like, I'm absolutely hammering this. Potentially, there's no Cordell Patterson for Atlanta. There potentially might not be a Kyle Pitts for Atlanta,
right,
who just magically wasn't at practice the other day. And the Bucks, even though they're coming off of this game where they allowed 31 points to the Chiefs, they hadn't allowed more than 14 points to all of these other opponents, which are, Dallas, New Orleans, and Green Bay. Atlanta, outside of, without Cordell Patterson and without Kyle Pitts, I really don't know where the offense is coming from. Drake London's been banged up. Marcus Mariota is not passing the ball pretty much at all, taking like less than double-digit attempts in these games. And, I just think that this kind of shapes up for the Buccaneers to kind of just, be able to win this game handily. Their team total is like 28.5, which is interesting, I think, but I don't know how Atlanta gets their team total of 19.5. So I'm looking at the under in that game as well.
So I want to go back to your first one. I mentioned earlier that there was a long money line that I bet. Boy. It was the Steelers plus 640. It was a half unit on that. And
let's go.
It's not one you feel good about, Ryan. We talked about a couple of those this week, but
man.
So the implied odds of plus 640 are 13.5%. So as long as you think the Steelers win odds are higher than 13.5%, you can bet it. And my numbers have the Steelers 18.5% to win. So 5 percentage points of value. I bet NASCAR a lot. If I were to have a guy 18.5% to win a race and his implied odds were 13.5%, I'd bet him every time without a segment of doubt. So I kind of feel like I got to do it here. And I did. I don't feel good about it, but like you said, a lot of defensive injuries. It's a more volatile spot with Kenny Pickett starting because there are a lot of unknowns with Kenny Pickett. I don't have a super high opinion of Kenny Pickett from like an NFL perspective because he wasn't a big standout in my prospecting model, but he fell deep in the draft too, which dings him quite a bit in that model as well because it's pretty dependent on draft capital. So my opinion of him is not great. But my opinion of him is higher than that of Mitchell Trubisky. I didn't change things drastically from an offensive efficiency perspective because there are so many unknowns.
Right.
But like there is a chance that there is this. I didn't even like factor in the Kansas City thing next week because I forgot that was happening next week. I've not done look ahead lines yet. But like plus 640 is it's a lot. So
it's enticing.
I put a half unit on it. I think
let's roll, baby. I don't know if I can back you that far about it, but I'll take my 14.5 and you get that money line. And that's great. No, I mean, these are any given Sunday, right? This is why they kind of play the game. These are, things can be shocking. Bills Mafia would absolutely riot. And they would have no choice. That would be an interesting way to see what the line is in the Kansas City Buffalo team. If this team goes out, lays a duck against the Steelers within Kenny Pickett's first full official start, there would be some hell to pay. But that's an interesting one. No, we always got to look at, I mean, especially when you're talking about 5-1, anything over 5-1, it's always worth a merit of just, looking at it, dabbling that, whether you go half a unit, quarter of a unit, whatever the case may be. I mean, these are kind of things that happen. They happen all the time and people just don't realize and look at it. And, always sitting there on Sunday night being like, man, how did I not see that coming? and this is why we take the shot. So I like that, Jim.
You mentioned the Atlanta thing too. My numbers agree with you, where I've actually got them with lower win odds than the Steelers for this week. So very skeptical of Atlanta. Wow. Very skeptical of their offense specifically in that situation. I know that the Bucs struggled against Kansas City, but like, who cares? It's Kansas City.
Right.
As much as I love Marcus Mariota, he's not Patrick Mahomes. So I'm not going to fret about that too much. So I think we're pretty aligned across the board for this week, which feels good heading into this one. That's all we got here for this week 5 NFL podcast. I think it's a pretty fun card. I feel, despite having some gross bets, I still feel good about my slip for this week, and we'll see how it plays out across the entirety of this weekend. We're back once again on Monday to talk some Monday Night Football. We got the Chiefs and the Raiders coming up then, but also our prop preview is coming up for tomorrow. Make sure you are subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts, and also over on the FanDuel YouTube page. Ryan, good luck with the rest of your move, and we'll talk to you once again very soon.
Sounds good, Jim. I appreciate it, buddy. Good luck, everybody. Get that money.
All righty. Find Ryan on Twitter at RyanAlexander_W. I am on Twitter at Jim Sonis. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to everyone for tuning in for this week. Good luck to you with your NFL Week 5 bets. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow to talk about some player props for this week. This has been Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.